A successful architect, Jeremiasz Angust, presents his new book from the stage. He explains that since childhood he has been obsessed with the idea of perfection, which became the driving force behind his career choice. 20 years ago, however, he faced a crisis that forced him to reconsider the very essence of his work. The truth is that architecture is business, nothing more and nothing less. That is why Jeremiah's company decided to change its client base. Instead of fulfilling the whims of the wealthy, they began building public hospitals in poor countries. When his speech ends, the audience begins to applaud. After the official part, Jeremiah signs autographs under the flash of journalists' cameras. But he must quickly cut it short because he risks missing his flight. Jean Rosen, an old friend and assistant of Jeremiah, hails a taxi for him and remarks that it is high time he started a family. Yet Jeremiah, carrying the weight of painful experiences from the past, is in no hurry to do so. The man heads to the airport, but the entire city is at a standstill due to traffic jams. Suddenly, a young woman knocks on the car window and, apologizing in advance for the intrusion, asks Jeremiah if he is going to the airport. She explains that she may miss her flight and it is impossible to catch a taxi. Jeremiah politely invites her to join him. She introduces herself as Texel Textor, a Dutch woman. At some point, Texel realizes she has left her luggage right on the street. Inside is her passport. If they turn back, Jeremiah will most likely miss his flight, but he still asks the driver to make a U-turn. Texel keeps thanking her companion again and again. For some reason, the taxi driver grows nervous. After retrieving the luggage, they continue on their way. The woman chats without pause, saying that people are often surprised by her unusual surname. With a name like that, she jokes, she could have become a writer. Jeremiah replies that it is never too late to start. They arrive at the airport. With a hurried farewell to his new acquaintance and wishing her luck, Jeremiah rushes to his gate, but boarding has already closed. Now he will have to wait 2 hours for the next flight. In the VIP lounge, he opens the webpage of his site and deletes all negative comments. There, the man encounters Texel again, who also missed her flight. She starts pestering Jeremiah. He politely says that he is not in the mood for conversation, which prompts Texel to accuse him of rudeness. The man explains that he is under no obligation to keep up a discussion. After all, he already helped her and missed his flight because of her. But Texel still does not leave, continuing to chatter on and on. She assumes that Jeremiah is a typical businessman whose only goal is to earn as much money as possible. The man objects, saying that he is an architect and that this airport is his project. At once, Texel's aggression turns into admiration, and she offers Jeremiah a drink to make up for her behavior. He tries to refuse, but the woman does not give him such a chance. During their conversation, Texel decides to share her greatest secret. When she was 10 years old, she lived with her mother's husband, and 3 more cats. Jeremiah imagines a typical apartment in a high-rise block. He himself grew up in one, but Texel counters, saying that she lived in a mobile home in a trailer park, very far from the city. She was a quiet child and hated her stepfather. Even Texel's mother did not love her. In addition, the girl had problems with food intake. She could not tolerate many tastes and smells, which infuriated her stepfather. Her mother never defended her. When the girl refused to eat, her mother punished her by making her cook food for the cats. The sight of liver pâté made Texel feel sick, but one day something snapped in her mind and she began ravenously devouring the cat food. And it seemed to her the most delicious thing she had ever tasted in her life. Texel declares that it was not really she herself who ate that food. It was her inner enemy, the one every person carries. Jeremiah replies that with such stories she should see a psychiatrist. Barely holding back tears, Texel apologizes and says she will not trouble him again, after which she leaves. Feeling a pang of guilt, Jeremiah calls after her and says that he is sorry. As if nothing had happened, Texel offers him food. She is ready to continue her story. When the girl was 12, there was a classmate named Feline, her only friend. Feline was the best in the ballet section, and in their school that was a direct path to popularity. Jeremiah once had a friend like that, Frank Hoffman, popular and athletic, but Jeremiah never envied him. Texel, however, does not believe the man. She also points out that he once again projects his own childhood, though their schools were entirely different. Deep down, Texel hated Feline for her perfection. Everyone liked Feline. Texel, on the contrary, was weak, sickly, and withdrawn. With each passing day, Texel's hatred grew stronger. Her friend had everything she herself was deprived of: a big house, new toys, and above all, a loving family. Even when Texel ruined Feline's dolls, the girl kept inviting her, out of pity perhaps. One evening, when her mother and stepfather were quarreling again, Texel's inner enemy made itself known once more, and she decided to destroy Feline's perfection. Texel claims that she made a voodoo doll and thus rid herself of her rival. The very next day, the teacher announced it to everyone. Jeremiah, bewildered, tells Texel that it was not her fault, but mere coincidence. Yet the woman insists that it was her hatred that took Feline's life. According to the official version, it was a heart attack, which seems impossible considering that Feline was completely healthy. Such a thing happened twice in Texel's life. Jeremiah decides to end the conversation and, wishing Texel all the best, goes to the restroom. But she continues to follow him, her behavior becoming more intrusive and sinister. Returning to the waiting lounge, Jeremiah tries to forget this unpleasant encounter like a bad dream, when suddenly Texel appears again and begins to talk. He demonstratively puts on his headphones to block her out. Naturally, Texel does not like this, and she threatens him. She is determined to finish her story. Jeremiah demands an answer, asking who she really is. Having already looked through the photographs from the conference, he discovered that Texel had been among the guests, which means she deliberately got into his taxi. The woman stubbornly denies it, but Jeremiah understands that she is lying. Moreover, through Jean Rosen, who has the list of conference guests, the man learns that apparently her real name is Alice Myers. When Jeremiah suggests that the woman is trying to make advances toward him, it provokes loud laughter from her. She shows him her passport, confirming that her name is Texel Textor. Her last story is about love, but it is unrequited because the object of that love is dead. It was the first time in her life that Texel felt drawn to someone, the most beautiful person on earth. At that time, the girl's mother had found a new man. Texel decided to run away from home and move to Paris. When the girl was walking through a cemetery, she stumbled upon a certain grave, beside which stood a person. Texel does not specify whether it was a man or a woman, but in his imagination, Jeremiah for some reason envisions a woman. One day, Texel even dared to speak to this person. She never received an answer, but she did see the face, and it was pure perfection. That gaze struck the girl to the core of her being. Texel insists that Jeremiah has no idea what it feels like when one is rejected by everyone all one's life. Because he is attractive and successful, it is like dying of thirst and having no chance to drink. The girl began following the object of her love. There is something thrilling about pursuing a person. It is like chasing one's desire, in the literal sense. Seeing no other way, Texel took the life of the object of her love, there, right in the cemetery. Then she dragged the body into a nearby crypt to look more closely. It turned out that the person had not died, but was merely unconscious. At some point, the person leapt up and ran, crying for help. A man walking toward them called an ambulance. Jeremiah feels he's about to vomit from all these stories. He does not understand why Texel is telling him any of this. Instead, she should better go see a doctor. With a smirk, the woman asks why she would need a psychiatrist when there are airports. Besides, this is not the end of the story. In search of the object of her love, she combed every street of Paris, neighborhood by neighborhood, every cafe, bar, bakery, shop, everything one can imagine. Jeremiah has already guessed that it is a woman she is speaking of. Why was Texel so fixated on her and never tried to find someone else? In fact, she did try, though deep down she understood that no one could replace that one. It drove Texel to despair. And then, 2 years later, when she was already ready to abandon the search, she saw her again. She would have recognized her even in a crowd of 4 million women. Time had only made her more beautiful. Texel followed the woman to the cemetery, once again, and there approached her. But the woman did not recognize Texel, which inevitably upset her. The girl kept insisting that they knew each other. For some reason, the woman mistook Texel for the companion of Berg, a friend of her husband, with whom they had dined in Amsterdam. Texel invited herself over and in this way extracted the woman's address. At that moment, the girl felt as if she were in seventh heaven. At home, she pulled from her wardrobe the outfit she had been saving especially for this day. Who could have thought that after 2 years of searching, she would find her love once again? The next day, precisely at 5, as agreed, Texel arrives, lying that Berg was delayed at work. In her ridiculous glittering outfit and bright blue makeup, the girl looked nothing like the wife of a businessman. Nevertheless, the woman invited her inside. Her apartment was very old-fashioned, very bourgeois. Her husband was working through lunch, so it would be only the two of them, which was exactly what Texel wanted. At some point, the woman realizes that before her stands the mad woman who had attacked her at the cemetery 2 years ago. Texel declares that she is there out of love, and then hands the woman a knife. All the girl wants is to know her name, and then to die at her hand. That, she says, would be the happiest moment of her life. But when the woman makes a dash for the door, Texel attacks her and takes her life. Only after the death of her beloved does she learn her name, Isabelle. Thus, Texel committed the perfect crime, since she is still at large. When Jeremiah hears the name, he is shocked and asks the girl who told her that. Then he rises, and barely steady on his feet under the surge of emotions, leaves to the restroom where he washes his face with cold water. Texel follows him. Jeremiah demands an answer. How does she know about Isabelle's disappearance, and what game is she playing? Surely their meeting cannot be a coincidence. Texel declares that she sought him out in order to die. Will he not do it after she has confessed to taking the life of his wife? Isabelle's disappearance was the worst thing that ever happened to him, as it was to Texel. Jeremiah loses control, and it no longer matters to him that he is once again late for his flight. Yet, pulling himself together, the man demands that Texel explain herself. Otherwise, he will call the police. She cannot possibly be involved in the disappearance or death of his wife, because Isabelle vanished 20 years ago when Texel was still a child. The girl hints that he can finish what was begun on the plane. They are on the same flight. No longer willing to speak with a madwoman, Jeremiah prepares to board, constantly looking around, expecting Texel to appear, but she never does. At some point, despite the flight attendant's attempts to stop him, the man insists on leaving the plane. All these 20 years, he has had no peace, never knowing what became of his wife. And perhaps Texel is the only one who has the answer. She tells him that if he wants the continuation of her story, he must first tell his own. A story for a story. Jeremiah recounts that at the time he and Isabelle had moved into a new apartment, and after 4 years of marriage, they were planning to have a child. But lately, he had begun to notice that his wife was not herself. She seemed to have grown distant from him. He even started to suspect that she had someone else. It was not their first serious quarrel, but this time, something went wrong. Jeremiah returned to work and immersed himself in the construction of the airport. In the end, Jeremiah was the first to take a step toward reconciliation, bringing Isabelle a bouquet of flowers. But when she went to fetch something to drink, Jeremiah found her plane ticket from Paris to Amsterdam. But why would she want to leave his perfection? Jeremiah never had the courage to ask her about the ticket, paralyzed by his eternal fear of failure. That was the last time he saw his wife. When there was no word from Isabelle for several days, he returned to their apartment, hoping she had come back from a trip to Holland. Isabelle was not there, but what he did find was a positive pregnancy test. Nothing has been heard of her for 20 years. Jeremiah asks Texel if she is his daughter, but the girl avoids the answer, which drives him even more insane. Suddenly, he wakes up on the plane. Could it have all been just a dream? And he sees Texel everywhere at once. At the same time, the flight attendants show no reaction to her. Texel is his inner enemy. It all began in childhood, when Jeremiah envied his friend Frank Hoffman, the most popular boy in class. If Jeremiah had a daughter, she would be like Texel, inheriting his cruelty and all his sins. Suddenly, he runs and tries to lock himself in the airplane restroom, but one cannot hide from oneself. Texel forces him to remember how he decided to take Isabelle's life. If she would not belong to him, then she would belong to no one. Only after that did he find the positive pregnancy test lying on the bathroom sink. Then, in order to cover his tracks, he took Isabelle's body and drove to the construction site. Concrete swallowed his secret forever. The airport became a crypt. Thus, Jeremiah committed the perfect crime, and then convinced himself that none of it had ever happened, that Isabelle had simply disappeared. Suddenly, the plane begins to flood with concrete. Jeremiah begs Texel not to prolong it, and she, laughing, begins to drown him in the cement. Jeremiah had first met Isabelle at a cemetery, and for 2 years afterward he tried to find her. Perhaps in reality they had never been married at all. In the end, Jeremiah gains the upper hand and defeats Texel, his inner enemy, after which he begins to persuade himself that he never harmed Isabelle, that she left on her own. Then Jeremiah calmly returns to his seat. The scratches on his hands and face, which had never existed, vanish.